Today we're going to go over how to master your movement in Apex Legends. There is so much to talk about, from the very basics to the more advanced techniques, and everything we're going to discuss will apply to all inputs and skill levels of players. As with all my guides, drop a comment if you have any questions, and with that out of the way, let's get right to it. Kicking us off is going to be those Apex Legends fundamentals. Some of this will be familiar to you, but I highly recommend getting a refresher, as some of the later, more advanced tips we will be building off what we go over here. On a basic level, there's 3 to 4 different levels of movement in Apex. Each level of movement has varying amounts of speed and partially a different level of loudness or audio to go with it. The slowest and most quiet way will be to move while crouch walking. This is the first sure way to get the drop on enemies if they don't know where you are, and it can have its uses. After this, there's just going to be walking up to enemies, which is slightly louder, but also a little bit quicker, and is still insanely effective at approaching a squad without them hearing you. Then there's going to be sprinting, the most traditional way to move quickly. And finally, there will be slide jumping, the ultimate and most basic skill you will need to utilize in Apex. It is also worth taking a second to just mention that in Apex Legends, putting your guns down or holstering your weapons is so important. This will give you the maximum amount of speed for your movements, and honestly, if you aren't ready to shoot, or if you aren't really hard scoping on an area or pre-aiming on an area, your guns should be down. Here's a very basic, very simple walk up of a stealth walk onto an enemy team. A team just finished fighting right outside this tunnel in World's Edge. Normally they would hear me if I did run down the tunnel, as the feet on the metal tracks is pretty audible, but they do not hear this, and we are able to get the drop on them and completely catch them off guard. Very simple, but very effective. Moving us on, we have slide jumping in Apex, and this is one of, if not the most useful techniques you need to have, as a simple slide jump will help you breach corners, chase enemies, and outmaneuver opponents, all with great amounts of speed. If you are unaware, sprinting, sliding, and then jumping gives you a moment of increased movement, which is just critical to be doing all the time. This needs to be done not only while you are fighting to catch players off guard, but also when you are just rotating around the map and even just on your loot runs. I cannot undersell the importance of just doing a slide jump to close gaps. In addition to just doing a slide jump, once again, be sure to always be holstering or putting your guns down to once again increase your velocity and movement speed. This could literally just mean in a fight where you are trying to get around the corner to get some shots on enemies, or if you are sliding up to an enemy to ape them in a close range battle. I may be hammering home the importance of putting your weapons down a little bit too hard here, but it is just so important to be doing, and on a basic level, this type of movement will enhance everything to follow. If you're going to take anything away though, sliding is really the definitive way to increase your movement speed, and for the majority of the movement mechanics in Apex in your games, your weapons should be holstered. A couple examples of the slide jump for you with the holster. The first one, we are popping a battery, we get a battery off, and then I do a simple holster, slide jump, pull the Mastiff out, and finish this fuse off with my Mastiff. Right after this, we have a Wraith that climbs up on me, kind of catching me off guard. I get some really great shots on that Wraith with the Peacekeeper in my flatline, and then I keep the pressure on her by doing a slide jump, even with my gun out this time, but I do get her down as I do follow her as she falls off the building. Continuing with some of the more basic movement techniques, we are going to have heal sliding. When doing a slide jump, right as you're about to go into that slide jump, begin to pop a healing item. This will let you get a little bit more movement and momentum to let you partially get that heal off with increased speed. You can also start to go into a bunny hop, and we'll touch more on bunny hopping later in the video. And additionally, if you are about to go down a hill or any sort of slope, healing while you are going down these can be helpful, as you will be able to keep your momentum and your movement up again while you are even popping healing items. A quick example for you is this slight heal I do right here. I am just rotating on World's Edge in the back of Thermal Station. I'm using both the ramp and the slope to my advantage by doing a slide jump and then popping a healing item out of this. Another slide technique you should be utilizing is going to be reverse sliding. This is slightly harder to achieve, as your momentum when going backwards is not as great when you are moving forward, but if you do it properly, you can actually do a jump and then a reverse slide backwards to evade enemies' fire and really just surprise them. This is much more easily achieved if you are jumping off of a lower height object, but it can also be done while you are on the ground as well. Here's a very basic example of reverse sliding for you. We already got one player knocked on this team. We're pushing the Wattson at the end. I do a simple reverse slide and go down a little hill in Storm Point at the center of the map, and this Wattson misses a lot of her shots on myself. Sliding is great to boost your movement speed, but what can be even greater is to edge slide. Edge sliding is the act of sliding right as you come in contact with ledges and other edges. Sliding off an edge or a ledge gives you a pretty substantial movement speed boost, and if you are able to do these edge slides while you are entering a fight, it can really be a great way to start off a fight in a close range battle, as you can breach gaps a little bit faster or just escape away just a little bit quicker. You can also chain these edge slides together to keep your movement speed up, and it's something that you could utilize while you are rotating around. Moving on, we now have the movement techniques, which I deem to be more of an intermediate skill level, as they require either a good sense of mechanical skill and timing, or just a good sense of timing to be done effectively and efficiently. Starting us off, we are going to have the bread and butter of all shooters, and this is going to be strafing, which is simply just moving left and right while in a gunfight. This is mega simple to do, but it does require a good sense of timing to more or less not look like a bot. Strafing has its uses, but the most notable use is going to be in a close range one-on-one fight where you are just trying to juke out the enemy's bullets. Obviously, a simple left and right motion is the easiest, but if you can, and you will want to try to incorporate a long strafe into your fights from time to time, having a long strafe every now and then gives your movement more randomness, and it can even force enemies' aim assist to get lost as you move outside the area of their aim assist. So in addition to those long strafes, also add in some jitterness between the short strafes and the long strafes. Also try to add a crouch here and there. This will make you significantly harder to hit and way more random. This does bring us to crouching in fights, or as some like to call it, crouch spamming. The big thing with crouch spamming is truly to not spam it, but rather do a crouch here and there to evade and confuse enemies. Admittedly, this is something I am still working on, as I often get in the mode of just slamming that crouch button or key as fast as I can. But if you can combine a solid strafe with a crouch here and there, you are going to be maximizing your randomness in your movement in both the left to right and up and down directions. If you do want a way to figure out how fast you can hit crouch and not just leave your head in the same spot, try going into third person in the firing range and check your maneuvers this way to get a proper feel down. And as I just hinted, if you do just spam crouch as fast as you can, your head more or less will just stay in the same spot, and you really aren't reducing your hitbox size nor making it confusing for enemies. The last advantage of crouching in fights is going to be that your hipfire accuracy will be improved, because this is more or less how your aiming or your accuracy works when you are crouched. This is something you can absolutely take advantage of, as if you are truly close to enemies, you may just want to hip fire them. Here's a very basic strafing to show you. The first one's against this caustic. He moves up onto me and I do a couple crouches and strafes, and he actually does miss a lot of his shots because of this. Second to this is just a simple fight against two players if using a Valkyrie. I start off with the crouch left and right, and then I do the same thing on the Valkyrie. After this, I do another one on this player right here. I actually use the roots as cover. I do a couple strafes and then crouch behind the roots. And then right after this, I do a couple crouches on the Wraith in the building. Even though she is not shooting back at me at this very moment, I'm still keeping myself mobile, so she is not able to do any damage on me, and I can better prepare for a third party. Moving on, we do have a few things in regards to climbing, and while climbing is a super basic skill, there's a lot of complex ways to utilize climbing to your advantage in fights. But before that, the first thing to mention is that you can simply just hang on to ledges in Apex. This does not always have the most uses, but it can be a great way to peek into areas while keeping the majority of your body safe. From this though, we are going to have angle or edge climbing, which can be utilized to wrap corners and approach scenarios pretty creatively. The most notable climbing areas are always going to be on World's Edge and Fragment, but there's a ton of spots around all of the maps where you can just climb up corners of objects to get to hard to reach spots. This obviously takes a ton of game knowledge to perform it in a useful manner, but once you do start incorporating some of these into your engagements, you will really be able to surprise players in a lot of creative ways. From edge climbing, we also have side climbing, which more or less lets you scale a wall in both the vertical and horizontal directions, allowing you to reach and even breach areas in even more creative ways. The final climbing technique you can utilize is going to be just simply fake climbing. This is a great thing to do around doorways, around areas where enemies are about to walk through. Climbing up next to the entrance of a building when enemies are walking in means you will mostly be getting out of their lines of sight, which can just completely surprise them. It's definitely situational, but it is something that you can be doing from time to time if the spot calls for it. If you are enjoying the video, or if you just want to support me, do me a huge favor and hit that like button. It helps the video get noticed, and I absolutely appreciate the support. Next up, we have peeking, one of the greatest ways in Apex to deal damage, but also prevent incoming damage. Peeking can be utilized at all ranges, from long-range poking to mid-range R301 beaming. to even close range shotgun battles. Peeking is more or less the art of coming out from behind cover and then sending out some shots before the enemies turn to you to get fire on yourself. Once you do get the enemy's attention, you would ideally want to hide back into your cover and then re-peek. Re-peeking generally should be done from a different side of an object, because if you did not deal massive damage in your first peek, enemies are probably going to be lined up on your area. Head peeking can also be done while you do have an angle from height on enemies, and this is honestly one of the best ways to do it, as you are concealing the majority of your body while you are dealing damage. The third method of peeking is simply just heel peeking, and this is just doing slight hops while you are behind an object, while you're popping any sort of heals from cells, batteries, or maybe something like a Phoenix kit. By doing this, you're continually gaining information as to the enemy's whereabouts, and you will be way better off and ready for a counterplay once you are healed up, or you can watch them approach you. The final method of peeking to mention is really just the strategy of baiting enemies. If you can tap yourself in and out of cover and you are able to get enemies to waste some shots on you, you can then wait for them to be nearly out of ammo and then give them a push when they have to reload. This can be something useful to do if they are in a spot of superior positioning, like height or something along those lines. Doors can be a fairly complex thing when it does come to Apex Legends, but I want to note one simple thing with them. Even though this is not a traditional movement technique, doors can be utilized quite heavily when it does come to general movement in fights, as they can be used to create escape avenues. They will help you get out of tight situations, as doors are really just barriers to give you a short moment of relief to get a battery or some sort of healing item off. Another strategy you can utilize is to camp on a doorway that an enemy is already on, wait for them to open the door, and when it does click, simply just back off the door with something like a shotgun ready to go. The door will open, and then you will be able to deal some damage on the enemies, and they honestly will not know when you're going to do this, because you only know when you're going to do this. Moving forward, we have a few things to mention with ziplines in Apex Legends. Ziplines through Apex Legends lifecycle have been watered down to the pretty basic in comparison to what they were, but we still have some useful ways to juke out your opponents and your enemies. The most basic thing to understand with ziplines is that after a few taps on a zip, you will no longer be able to connect to that zip for a brief moment, forcing you to fall to the ground or just reconnect a little bit farther down that zip line. This was implemented to prevent too much spamming of zip lines, but it is going to be these few taps that we can use to our advantage. Tapping around a zip line has its purpose, and it's absolutely for more than just looks and feeling super sweaty. By tapping back and forth on a vertical zip, you're creating confusion for your enemies and forcing them to waste ammo in their mags, which is just massive. You will want to understand this, and once you do a few taps and an enemy wastes some ammo, you can then proceed to hop off that and return fire when they are reloading or swapping weapons. Additionally, you can even use rapid taps to get in and out of floors of zipline buildings and areas, as well as even just doing a quick attach and detach to a zipline is a great way to get a small boost forward or upwards to propel yourself. This brings us to the technique known as zipline super bouncing or super jumping. This will give you increased vertical launch on ziplines and is simply done by attaching to a zipline and then rapidly double tapping right as you are connecting, sending you flying up in the air to either gain height or a different angle on enemies. This technique is more easily done on mouse and key, but it can also be done on controller. If you are failing to do the super jump, it's probably because you are just not double tapping jump fast enough, and you need to be insanely fast at this. I highly recommend picking Pathfinder and giving it a good try in the firing range. Pressing on, we now have the techniques that are a bit more advanced to execute successfully and efficiently, and we are starting with wall jumping. Wall jumping isn't the most difficult technique to perform though, but it is much more difficult to actually perform it in fights in a meaningful way. Wall jumping can be tricky to get down when you are first starting out, and to perform a wall jump, you more or less need to do the following. To get the biggest jump and leap off of the wall, you want to start to sprint, slide, and then jump into the wall at an angle. As you are about to come in contact with that wall, release your movement sticks or key, and then tap jump to jump off of that wall. As soon as you do a tap jump, you can then once again start redirecting yourself. If you are struggling to get this down, try using Horizon, as she has a little bit better in-air maneuverability, and it will be easier to get this motion down with her. Additionally, you can start off by just running in a straight line at the wall and tapping jump to hop off that wall. This will help you build a little muscle memory when you are trying to do the full thing. The most notable reason as to why you would want to do a wall jump is to more or less style on enemies, but it does have some practical purposes as well. When you are wall jumping, you will be moving through the air silently, so you can actually come into the fight at a different angle than most would expect, and you will more or less be pretty quiet. Another great thing to utilize wall jumping for is to just bypass any need to climb up objects. The wall jump will help bounce you up rather than having to take the time to climb up, leaving yourself slower and more revealing to enemy fire. Wall jumping is a massively fun technique, and I highly recommend you learn how to do it. When you are just rotating around the maps and have some downtime, try it out. This will maximize your efforts and help make you a better player even when the game is slow. From wall jumping, we now have bunny hopping, another semi-intermediate to advanced technique that has a pretty solid emphasis on timing to do it properly. Bunny hopping is really all about making your character more elusive and harder to hit and target in a fight or while you are trying to escape in open areas. Bunny hopping on a controller can be a tricky thing, and it can also be done a few different ways. The easiest way, in my opinion, will be to set your controller scheme to evolved so you can have both of your thumbs on the sticks at all times. Additionally, and like myself and many others, utilizing a controller with paddles will help you out a ton. The second setting you will need to change is going to have crouch set to hold, as this is more or less due to the nature of bunny hopping, as having crouch set to toggle makes it much more difficult. To start off with a basic way to learn bunny hopping, I once again suggest using Horizon, as her increased air movement will make it much easier to perform. Second to Horizon could be Octane and his stim, as the speed increase will make it easier to get bunny hopping down. Bunny hopping is achieved by sprinting and then going into a crouch slide, and then you will need to jump and continue to tap jump as your character comes in contact with the ground. The biggest mistake you can make is by spamming jump, as this will prevent hops and just kill your momentum. Start off by practicing this in a straight line, and eventually you will get the rhythm down as to how you do need a tap, and you will also be able to line up the audio cues with your tap jumping. Once you do get a few hops down in a straight line, you will then want to incorporate a slight side-to-side movement so your momentum and speed stays up, as a straight line hop will eventually make you lose speed. When taking turns with hopping, you will want to fully direct your left stick or movement stick in the left and right directions while you are softly maneuvering your right stick in the same direction to have yourself turn. This will help you do slow turns that keep your speed up and prevent yourself from just taking away, killing your momentum. The critical thing is to slightly move that right stick so you are just keeping it in line with the direction you are moving during a turn. Once you do get slow turns down, you can actually just move your left stick to the left and right between hops to move in a straight line without losing any momentum. It's gonna take a ton of practice to get down, so I highly encourage you hop around in the range to get the basics down, and then hop around when rotating to get the feeling for bunny hopping. Once again, the biggest reason to use bunny hopping is to make yourself harder to hit during a fight and to provide yourself with escapability, as the hopping motion will make you harder to hit. Another technique you can do is to bunny hop and then go into a heal. This will give you a slight speed boost and heal, and can help you get around a corner while also popping something like a shield cell. If you're an Octane user, a tip for you is to bunny hop while you are shield selling. If you are using Octane with the stim, this speed boost is enough to keep you hopping through a shield cell, and this means you will have a wild amount of movement while also being able to heal up, which is just so good and definitely unique to Octane. Truly, Octane is the best when it does come to bunny hop healing, but don't be afraid to partially utilize it with other legends as well. There is two movement techniques I want to briefly mention that I am not going to cover, as Respawn's stance on some of these movement techniques has been a little bit back and forth between them removing these techniques and just giving out words of warning, as some of them are borderline game manipulation. The first is going to be tap strafing, and this is not game manipulation, and this is fair go. Respawn is going to be allegedly nerfing this in the coming days, if not already by the time this video launches. The second is going to be super gliding. This is a masterful technique that involves crouching and jumping at the same time when reaching the apex of a climb, and the higher frame rate you have, the harder it is to do. It's a little bit weird, and it kind of comes down to the way Apex is coded. But if you're a console player, you'll have an okay time figuring this out. But if you are a PC warrior with 144 frames or higher, you're gonna have a little bit more of a challenge. If you want a resource as to learn how to do either of these, I suggest checking out the two videos in the description down below by Dazz, as I 100% trust his input, and he breaks things down way more analytically in terms of how to do these movement techniques and why they are actually the way they are. All in all though, just be warned, some changes to these are on the horizon, and they could change at any moment. If you're looking to excel your movement to the next level, the biggest thing is to utilize your downtime in matches and that firing range, as these are just golden areas to practice and increase your capabilities. If you want someone to chat with about Apex Legends, hop into the community Discord to interact with myself and the community. We also do giveaways in there from time to time, and you can also find others to party up with in there as well. We also just started a second channel with even more content, and the link to that and everything else is in the description down below. Until next time, Legends, happy gaming.